Hi, everybody. How is it going out there? My name is Sami, and I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We are on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market here in Canada. And our flagship product is a compliance platform to make staying on top of all your records and generating all the reports you need for the government super duper easy. If you guys are here right now, can you just say something in the chat so that I know that you guys are here and can hear us? I'm going to introduce Tamara in a moment here. I just want to make sure that Stacy says hi. Great. Just so you guys know, we do have a chat there where you guys can talk and amongst yourselves. If you have questions, we have a different dedicated questions tab. So go ask your questions there. You can upvote questions. And at the end, in the last 15 minutes that we have, we'll go through the questions in order of popularity. And that'll be how we go about that. And without further ado, I would like to introduce to you Tamara Follett, or Tamara Follett. Actually, I will let her say her name because I know I've screwed up her name so many times. Tamara is one of the most outspoken people in our industry. She holds nothing back and has no qualms with saying exactly what she thinks, no matter how it might rub certain people the wrong way, which is what we love about her and why we wanted to invite her here, because she has a wealth of experience, a wealth of knowledge, and a lot of insight from her background. So, Tamara, I'd like to turn this over to you for a bit to kind of maybe give us a little intro on who you are and before we get deep into the discussion itself.
Thanks, Sami. Well, I pronounce my name Tamara, but my Canadian pronunciation is Tamara. So I basically answer to anything that starts with a T. So I'm very easygoing that way. So yeah, my background, I retired in 2004 as a pharmaceutical regulatory compliance subject matter expert. I was a consultant with CSSC, and we were flown all over putting out fires. Typically fires being the FDA findings or observations, the 483s for clients. So, but I retired in 2004. In 2017, I was growing under ACMPR when legalization came on the horizon, and I thought, for the first time and only time in my life, I was in the right place at the right time. So I was the first time. So I was the fifth micro licensed in Canada and the first woman-owned micro. That was in 2019. Since then, I've been growing cannabis, fighting for fair treatment of micros, and ruling the Facebook micro community with an iron fist.
and one thing I also want to add to that list, Tamara, you have your DIY SOP kit, which a lot of growers have used to get licensed, and I think that's a super interesting perspective as well, because you understand what regulators are really looking for, having worked with GMP compliance for a lot of your career, and we're therefore able to create something that could be a template that's used. So I think that's also a perspective that's that adds to everything that you're going to share here today as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think to bring it up.
Well, we want to give you a shout out for the things that you do. So, Tamara, I know that there's a lot that you have to say and a lot that you have said. Like anybody who's been part of the Facebook group that you started knows that you see a lot of the challenges and issues that have taken place on the federal regulatory level. And with your background as somebody who's been heavily involved in regulated industries, you actually can speak to what is or isn't okay in a way that a cannabis producer who's entering a regulated industry for the first time doesn't maybe know that something is or isn't okay. So that's something I found really eye-opening about the conversations that you've started there within that Facebook group, to kind of realize, oh, I didn't realize the Health Canada not having a definition for what is a major or minor infraction is a big issue, and that actually is legally required, and various things like that. And I know we're going to talk all about that kind of stuff for most of this session here today. Before we get into that, though, I just wanted to see, is there anything that you feel is positive about the way that legalization has rolled out so far?
Well, legalization is positive, okay? And it presented Canada with a huge opportunity to become a global player in the industry, well ahead of anybody else. And the potential has not been seen yet, but I hold hope. So yeah, it's awesome that we have it legal now, and that a certain degree of regulation is in fact a good thing, because it makes it a cleaner, better product. But quite so much regulation, I'm not in favor of. But we'll get into that.
So on that note, like, you said that you had prepared a bunch of material. Like, do you want me to just like kind of let you get into it and share like your perspectives on the state of the industry, or would you like it to be like me to ask you guiding questions? Like, what's your preference, Tamara? I want to.
Oh, well, I prefer to. Well, as I've told you, Sami, most people talk at 300 words per minute, and I talk in gusts of 600. So it's very hard to break in with me once I get going. So it probably makes sense, given my presentation style, to just let me go. And if I say something that's too confusing, that needs clarification, then you're just going to have to break in. Okay, there's no
Great.
hand waving, and I'll notice I'll be on my on my tirade. So anyway, no. So I think now what I have is I have a list of issues with the industry, and then I have solutions. Okay, I'm not just a sideline quarterback who says this is wrong and that's wrong. I have solutions.
Yeah.
I beg your pardon?
I was just reiterating what you were saying. You're not going to just complain without actually providing anything.
Yeah, I actually have steps that can be taken, and advice and recommendations. And,
well, then everybody in the audience, put your helmets and seatbelts on, because we're going for a ride. Take it away, Tamara.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to start by addressing the elephant in the room that nobody talks about in this industry. And it's hard to imagine we've gotten so far into legalization without this being addressed. Health Canada was never in favor of cannabis legalization to begin with. So when they got saddled with it anyway, in true passive-aggressive fashion, they're making life thoroughly miserable for the entire industry. Well, unless you have a
question for you real quick. Sorry, I'm just going to interrupt there already. Is there any place where, like, how do you know that they didn't want cannabis to be legalized? Like, is there like
I give a lot of examples. Okay, I give a lot of examples, and everybody can make the decision for themselves by the end of this talk. Okay. So thus it is that 2.5 years from legalization, 2 words summarize the cannabis industry in Canada: missed opportunity. Canada could have been the global leader in cannabis by now with the head start that we had. But the powers that be, the government, the federal government, decided to make Health Canada the governing body when it was openly against cannabis to begin with. So by doing this, the government essentially put a vegan in charge of a fur farm. So you can see the problems with this. Thus, I submit that Health Canada has and will continue to introduce completely blatant obstacles just for the pure pleasure of watching the industry struggle. Case in point 1, no lessons were taken from the mistakes made by Oregon during their legalization, which preceded ours by a year. The exact same mistakes were allowed to be made here, with no market controls in place, no limits on production, no price controls, or any limits on standard license counts. An enormous glut of product is sitting in vaults, price crashes have occurred, and bankruptcies have started less than 2 years after legalization. This is inexcusable, given that a glut hit Oregon while Canada's rollout was still being designed. Economics 101, supply and demand. This alone should have initiated the termination of all the decision makers involved in this. Case in point 2, imagine a new applicant flush with success from pressing the submit button on their micro application. Do you know what the first communication from Health Canada is? An intent to refuse notice. It's Health Canada's unnecessarily adversarial way of asking for more information. Everyone gets one, no matter how much or how little additional information
That's
Health
so
Canada
fucked up. Like
needs.
the very first thing that you receive is a letter that's saying we intend to refuse your application.
Yes. We intend to refuse your application unless you provide this additional information that we need. Everybody gets it.
That's
Hard to
bizarre.
believe. It's a totally unnecessary, unprovoked display of passive aggression for no other discernible reason, I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong here, than to continue to punish the industry for the legalization of cannabis. It's juvenile. Moreover, it's conduct unbecoming a ministry of the government of Canada. And instead of calling Health Canada on it, the industry is meekly allowing this nonsense to go on. We have legal recourse, administrative law, tribunals. The Supreme Court of Canada has stated that procedural fairness incorporates the principles of fundamental justice. Why are we putting up with this? 2 years in, instead of Health Canada stepping up to the plate and turning Canada into the global cannabis power we deserve, Health Canada is still playing at juvenile revenge games. A missed opportunity. People tell me that I'm really hostile towards Health Canada. I tell them I didn't draw first blood. But don't take my word for it that Health Canada is openly obstructive with the industry. That's made painfully obvious on a near daily basis. We have unreasonable layers of licensing. Want to sell to medical patients? You need to obtain 3 different licenses that will take years to obtain in order to participate. Want to sell your product retail? 2 licenses and something called a sales amendment, which is effectively a 3rd license. And I will continue to refer to it as a 3rd license because it is so difficult to get. One micro in this country has that sales amendment license such that they can sell their flower direct to retail. Okay, so we have 0 farm gate sales, of course, at this point, but only 1 micro that can package their own flower and direct sell it to retail.
And I believe
So,
as of last week, I don't know if that's changed this week, we have about, I think it's 153 total micro cultivation licenses that have been granted so far, if I remember correctly.
And 47 of those are microprocessors. So you have to have multiple licenses. The microcultivator allows you to cultivate cannabis. The microprocessor allows you to put it in a little bag and excise stamp it. And the sales amendment allows you to actually sell that little bag.
That's super fucked up. So it's basically, we're talking about 2%. 1 out of 47 is roughly 2%. 2% of the people who have gotten the license that is meant to allow them to package and sell their cannabis, maybe do additional types of processing. Only 2% of those licenses can actually do what they have
one in the whole
do.
country.
Yeah.
1 in the entire country, 2.5 years after. There was 2, but one of those micros upgraded to a standard, so they don't count anymore. Standards they don't count. Sorry, but my thought. But anyway, so
how are you supposed to even be able to like work on a business model? If your business model is, hey, I'm going to spend years, maybe $1 million when we're talking about a processing license to get this license to be able to sell, I'm going to like write in like a year of losses, like, because I know it's going to take time to ramp up and get this license, so on and so forth. Then you get your license, you're ramped up, and then it sounds like if only 1 person has it, you're waiting for months, if not years, to get that sales amendment. Like, and how are you
9 months
to
to a year to get the sales amendment? That whole process needs to be sped up.
That's so silly. It's like, what's the point of the processing license if you can't sell with that?
Yeah.
Like, if you're gonna make selling and packaging and selling your cannabis a different license from growing it,
why do you have to have yet another thing before you can actually sell it to a distributor? And it's a big deal. It's like I said, of the 150 some odd micro cultivators, there's 47 that are microprocessors and 1 that can sell their flower that has a sales amendment for dried flower. Mm-hmm. And so 1 that can sell direct to a distributor.
And so realistically, if there's
you
a micro cultivator that wants to package and sell their own flower, based off what you're saying, with the way the industry is right now, it sounds like it's going to be like 1.5 to 2 years until they can actually start to sell their flower. The
yes.
6 months to a year to get the microprocessing license, and then 6 months to a year to get that sales amendment.
Yes.
Which is pretty
That's
silly.
it, exactly.
If all you're trying to do is take flour, put it in a bag or in a jar and sell it. It's like, there's not, is that really such a difficult thing that you need to go through that huge of a process?
And the requirements that Health Canada has on the quality assurance person. Okay, so to get your microprocessing license, you have to have a quality assurance person on staff. Okay, and
they have to have a science degree, don't they?
One of the ways, what's that?
They have to have a science degree, don't they?
Oh, please! I wish it was that easy. They're demanding unreasonable QAP qualifications. Okay, it doesn't take many skill sets to bag your own flower, right? But Health Canada is requiring direct experience in quality assurance for either food or pharmaceuticals across the board, no matter how small of a micro it is, no matter how little fancy stuff you just want to put it in a bag and sell it. Across the board, everybody's got to have QA experience in food or pharmaceuticals. If you've got QA experience in anything else, like nuclear chemistry, not good enough to bag your own flower. God's honest truth. God's honest truth. Yep. It's unbelievably rigid, the requirements they have for the QAP.
That's super odd. It's like if you were a QAP at a radioactive waste facility, it's like you're gonna have much
to bag your own flower
understanding and experiences than somebody who, I mean, I do get that, like, you know, a food QAP is gonna there's going to be a lot more comparable like overlaps than somebody doing radioactive waste, but the level of quality you're doing at radioactive waste is like so much more stringent than anything involving bagging cannabis is going to be so simple in comparison. That seems super bizarre to me.
And exactly. It's beyond bizarre. Okay, so this is where I'm saying these are obstacles. They must be obstacles put into place to keep out small players from the market. It must be. I mean, there's just, over a year ago, Health Canada said, yes, we're going to be modifying the QAP requirements to make them commensurate with the actual requirements of bagging flour, or making an edible, but they haven't yet. It's still in place. They're still asking for ridiculous things like validation of test methods experience. That's something that no micro needs to know how to do. We aren't going to have our own in-house testing. We are all using Health Canada certified laboratories presumably, because they are certified, are using validated test methods and know how to validate their test methods. Another thing they're asking for is conveyances. Who needs experience with conveyances? We're doing the bagging by hand.
What does conveyances? I don't know what that term means. What does conveyances mean?
Conveyances are things like encapsulation machines, tablet presses, packaging lines. None of us are going to be doing anything with conveyances. Okay, get that one out of there. That's unreasonable.
Yeah, that should be a stipulation if and only if you are doing that stuff.
Yes.
that would make sense.
That's logic. Yes, that's right, exactly. The other one is, do you have any experience with effectiveness studies? Please delineate your experience with effectiveness studies. An effectiveness study is a clinical trial. I know of no micro that's going to be conducting their own clinical trial. It's beyond absurd that they would
And so are these that you've been listing? Are these the requirements for the QAP? Are these the requirements to get your processing license? Like what are
QAP,
we?
Same as you have to have a QAP before you can get your processing license. The QAP needs to meet these requirements, these stringent requirements that even for a standard, it's going to cost you, a 6-figure salary to get somebody on board like that. I know. I was the consultant that got a 6-figure salary for having those,
qualifications.
Requirements, those qualifications. Exactly. So,
beyond the money cost too, it's just like, now the
Who
pool of
needs that
people
much
you can work
experience?
with is so much smaller, and the time that it takes to find somebody who meets the qualification, it takes so much longer. And so even if let's assume for a moment that you can get your processing license in a week, if you were to find the right people, it's still going to take you so many months, because you're going to have to find somebody that you connect with on a personal level, that's a good fit for your team culturally, that's
Yeah.
geographically around, that actually has these requirements. And so the more of these restrictions you have that don't really make sense, the harder it's going to be to
The
find that
more
person.
obstacles.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more obstacles there are to the small player who can't afford a six-figure salary to ship somebody in from out of province who has those qualifications.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's unreasonable to expect all of these qualifications for a micro who just wants to package their flower.
Yeah.
It hasn't changed in 2.5 years of me gritching about this. It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
There don't seem to be any indications that it's going to change. What would you call it other than an obstacle to small player market entry?
It could also be incompetence.
I would hope that, okay, yeah,
I do think
exactly.
there
Well,
has,
I
I
mean,
do
yeah,
think there have definitely been some deliberate decisions made to hinder small players. And I don't know if that's necessarily on Health Canada's end or elsewhere, but I do firmly believe that there's been some money exchange between a lot of the bigger players who saw craft cannabis as a threat to what at the time was a monopoly in the legal world, and definitely used their connections to government and their wealth to try to create regulations and policies that favor them and their necessities. And that's been as there's public records of lobbyist organizations and the kinds of things they're lobbying for, and there's been admittance from such lobby organizations that they have actively targeted measures such as these. But in Health Canada's case, I think there is some of that. Like I won't make any claims to what extent, but I also think that their background is pharma. Their background is pharmaceutical things, and they were given something that isn't. So in some ways, they're just doing what they know. Like they don't understand agriculture. They don't understand growing and farming. So I do want to give them the benefit of the doubt as well. That it's they're just doing what they're used to, right? And the mistake, in my opinion, is that why is Health Canada doing cultivation? Why are they handling packaging? If we're going to talk about creating pills or suppositories or the various things that, like, maybe at that point, okay, maybe we do want to get a bit more highly regulated, especially if it's not just a solventless extraction where there's no chemicals entering. Same thing. Like, why would it be that overregulated? But once you're getting volatiles into the picture, like, sure. Like, I think honestly that it should have been like an agricultural ministry, whether it's provincial or federal level, that takes on cultivation, because then the ministry itself has in-house expertise on what it means to have agricultural products. Health Canada has no in-house expertise. They've had to develop that, and the mentors within Health Canada, their background is pharmaceuticals, not cannabis. So I think there's just like a complete misalignment of
there is, and that's part of the problem. But remember that the QAP is a QAP for most micros is going to be overseeing bagging of flour. Okay, so that's not a suppository, but it is a microprocessing task. Okay, so even then it's overkill for the microprocessing, for the QAP to have all this experience to bag flour. Their experience needs to be commensurate with what the tasks are they're going to be doing.
100%
as you said, if they're doing extractions, with volatile, then okay, absolutely, definitely, you need somebody with that degree of experience. But bagging your own flour, this is an unnecessary impediment, and it's not the only unreasonable impediment in the industry. I have a whole list of them.
Great. So we've talked about QAPs for a while. What's the next thing, Tamara?
Yeah. So I one of the other blockades is unreasonable inspection criteria. Every other regulated industry has published approved guidelines on what can be called a major observation versus what is just a minor observation. When we're talking about every other regulated industry, I'm talking controlled substances, clinical trials, pharmacovigilance, cells, tissues, and organs, all of the other. We are a regulated industry too, but we don't have our own published approved guidelines. Majors can be handed out for outdated, unused SOPs and good faith, fully documented efforts in the face of a multitude of unanswered questions from Health Canada. And I'm speaking from experience there after asking multiple times for guidance on in-house QC testing. I wrote up an SOP for it, submitted it for review, and got a major for my efforts. So no, without written approved standards, anything is allowed to be called a major. Okay.
And I know from the experience of some of our customers at CertiCraft, we've had some customers who've been audited and they've received minors or majors because the auditor just didn't even understand the regulations, and they just like they misunderstood some aspect of it.
Oh God, yeah.
And it's really sad to see people who like just are in a position of power, have a lot of confidence and understanding of it, and don't have basic reading comprehension. Like there's been a lot of challenges that we've seen where it's just like, it literally says only applied to processors. Why are you making me do this? I know this.
Right. That's right. Exactly.
One of you who's in this chat told me about that situation earlier this week, and I won't say your name in case you want it confidential.
Absolutely. And training is a huge issue with Health Canada. I feel like every time I speak to an inspector on the phone, I'm training them. You know, so and informing them what the regulations say. And
yet you, a person I am informing, have the power to take away my license, and that's kind of screwed up if you don't if you're not actually a true expert.
That's right, exactly. And of course, without written approved standards, there are wildly varying results on the same criteria during inspections from one side of the country to the other. One license holder
depends on the auditor that you have and what their
depends on your auditor, how well trained they are, how experienced they are. Yeah, exactly. Yep. One license holder will get a major for an 8-page recall SOP that's slightly out of date. Well, another license holder gets nothing for a recall SOP that consists of 4 sentences. It's just wildly, it's unacceptable variance. Okay.
So Tamara, question for you. For the standards for what constitutes major, minor infractions, so on and so forth, is that a requirement by law that regulatory industries have to have that?
I don't know that. I just know that they all have it except for cannabis. And they are all virtually identical. If you look at the clinical trials standards for major and minor observations, they're virtually identical to pharmacovigilance, to controlled substances. They're all, it would be a copy and paste, from one of those into cannabis.
So even if it's not required by law, there's a very clear precedent that says this is what you do for regulated industries, and that would be, in my opinion, a pretty easy court case to essentially force Health Canada to do this if they don't do it of their own accord, because it's obvious that you can't you can't hand out infractions without having a definition of what infractions are.
Yeah, and you can't assess me based on standards that I have no access to. Okay, standards that are not published. That, I mean, if they want cannabis to have their own standard, fine, then publish it. Say, we will give you a major for an out-of-date SOP that you do not use. We can do that in this industry. They have the capacity to do that. Now, I would still take them to tribunal because we're talking about procedural fairness here. You know, every regulated industry is treated the same way except for cannabis. Why is cannabis somehow worse than OxyContin or morphine? You know, I mean, it's just, it boggles the mind. Okay. There's also inconsistency across the country, wildly varying acceptance criteria for facilities. I used OSB in my facility. OSB is chipboard. It's painted with 3 coats of
Oh,
breakthrough
I thought you were
paint.
talking about your organizational security plan. I was like, what? What do you?
OSB. No, it's chipboard. It's what you can use in your facilities. Okay. And there's wildly varying acceptance criteria. Okay. OSB was approved in my facility a year ago in March of 2020. It's painted OSB. It's twice as strong as plywood. Okay. So, I mean, it's not going to chip or crumble into the product. But OSB was recently in this March rejected for another micro facility in the same province. Okay. Yep. Meanwhile, drywall is getting approved. Painted drywall is getting approved.
Which, as anybody knows, you can scratch it and it starts to crumble.
Yeah, you can take a hatchet to my painted OSB. Try that with painted drywall. I mean, it's just inconsistent, unjustifiable, and ultimately unprofessional. Okay. All right. So that's another, maybe, okay, let's give Health Canada benefit of the doubt. Growing pains. All right. But they need to resolve these growing pains. They need to be consistent from one end of the country to the other on what are acceptance criteria for facilities.
So speaking of resolutions, we are about 15 minutes away from the 45-minute discussion section.
Oh, no, I'm not remotely finished.
Okay, so how about this? Let's spend let's spend the next 5 minutes just like quick shotgun approach. Just share like a high-level list of other issues that you see without getting into discussion about them, and then the last 10 minutes we'll get into solutions. Does that sound good to you?
Okay, that sounds good. Okay, good.
Let's do that.
All right, so there's ridiculous pesticide restrictions on innocuous agricultural treatments like hydrogen peroxide. Agricultural hydrogen peroxide can be used legally on your plants to wash them. But if you knock off a caterpillar with the stream, it's considered a pesticide. I got nailed with a finding, a regulatory finding for mentioning casually that I hoped by washing my plants regularly, it would reduce the microbial load in the final product. I was deemed to have used hydrogen peroxide as an unapproved pesticide. Oh my God. Recently, diatomaceous earth, also now an approved pesticide. People don't believe this. They just don't believe it in the greenhouse industry. I had to send a copy of the article to Greenhouse Canada so they would believe me. So
wait, I just want to interrupt one moment here. For everybody who's watching in the chat, if you want us to go longer so Tamara doesn't have to rush through this last bit, please share in the chat if you'd rather us go longer and maybe go for an hour and a half total or something like that, or if you'd rather keep it shorter to the 45 minutes and 15 minutes answer section. But you keep going, Tamara. I'm just going to monitor what the people are saying they prefer.
Okay, well, and I can speed it up. So one of the things that the process for Farmgate is making it so arduous that OCS is requiring to have a space on the micro's floor that's delineated or demarcated as OCS warehouse space. Okay, warehouse science is a mature field. We don't need to mark floor plan space out for OCS. So a clue OCS is that quarantine is an attribute of the product, not the floor plan. And OCS, please find a consultant who can interpret that before you make yourself a laughing stock to the rest of the world. This is really old science. Okay.
Sarah, just to let you know, we've had 3 comments so far, and everybody wants you to go for longer. So take your time. We'll go for as long as this discussion needs to go instead of trying to fit it into the 45-minute window there. So thanks, Stacy, Lacey, and that rhymes, Stacy, Lacey, and Deidre. I don't know how to pronounce your name. Thanks for sharing your thoughts, and yeah, go ahead, Tamara.
Good. Okay. Well, not only do we have ridiculous restrictions on innocuous treatments for the plants, for our plants, with a regulatory finding that can affect our compliance status, our ability to continue to produce product. If you're found non-compliant, you cannot produce or sell product until you are back into compliance. So,
And what's
so
like
it's
is
serious.
are those minor or major infractions you're talking about earlier, like having an out of date SOPs? Does that count as being non-compliant and would prohibit you from being
Oh,
able to
mine
sell
was
your products?
major. Mine was a major. Absolutely. It counts towards noncompliance. It says in the other regulated industries, if you get 5 or more, you're non-compliant automatically if you get 5 majors or more.
Yeah.
You're automatically non-compliant because you've got too many observations against you. We don't have any idea how many too many is in this industry because we have no standards to work with.
Mhm.
So, it's anyway,
Yeah.
I want to go on. So one of the things that we have are unreasonable microbial limits for recreational. Everything produced in Canada is medical grade. This adds unnecessarily to the cost of production and ultimately the cost to the consumer. Microbial limits need a recreational level as well as a medical cannabis level. We don't need
I disagree slightly with one of the things you said. I don't think it's a medical level; it's a pharmaceutical level because
pharmaceutical grade. Yeah.
there's amazing, like I know a lot of people who medicate using cannabis, and they want organic cannabis that is sun grown, that has a huge microbial count. It's literally growing outside in a field, and that's amazing medicine. It's not pharmaceutical. But so I don't want to use the term medical to mean there's no microbial count, because it's most of the microbes that live in cannabis naturally are very healthy for your gut. They're not pathogens, and so
Yeah, that's it exactly. And I'm
that's one
fully in
point of contention
favor.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fully in favor of the pathogenic and toxic pathogens being tested, microbes being tested for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But to count everything that's on the plant as a microbe that counts towards your maximum that you're allowed to have, it's nonsensical. It
Yeah.
doesn't contribute anything to the safety of the product. So these
Especially
limits.
when there's not a single study in the world that has ever shown that it does negatively impact things. Like I would that's one of the things that I feel really disappointed about with Health Canada. It's like there have been no studies that show that this is actually a negatively impacting thing. So why are you making this policy decisions, regulatory decisions, where there is no science to back it? Shouldn't everything that you do be
Yeah,
based off of science and actual trials that have been shown?
that's right. That's right. And even testing the limits, one lab will come up with a different test than another lab will. So, or a different limit than another lab will. So, and that's also with THC. I mean, what you give
Yeah.
to say divide a sample in half and give half of it to one lab and half of it to another lab, and you've got wildly different THC levels. There need
Yeah,
to be some
you'd think
standardization.
there'd be standards there, wouldn't you?
Yeah, you would think exactly.
It seems
Yeah,
like from what I've observed, and I have not really engaged too much with labs, but I have talked to a few people who do work for labs and people who are quite familiar with it. But it seems that Health Canada has kind of like just let labs do their own thing without any oversight whatsoever, and that's led to a lot
and
of these kind.
too much oversight with us. Let's
Yeah.
spread the wealth a little bit. Health Canada, let everybody get some of that's being so focused on us.
And what's funny is like the area that doesn't have any oversight, that's what goes on the label. That's what dictates what somebody is going to receive. And I don't think this is happening, but let's just assume that because of the lack of oversight, somebody is really incompetent in what they do, and they end up saying that there's like a batch that has like 8% CBD and 2% THC, and it turns out it is actually 10% THC and 1% CBD. And somebody who gets paranoid from THC easily buys that cannabis because of what it says, and then they're freaking out having
situation. Yeah, that's a recall situation. You have to be within a certain amount, but yeah, there's the danger of that happening if you have such uncontrolled. And so now what they're doing is they're allowing a range, and the range is quite large. The range can be 17% to 22%. That's a big range of THC.
It actually can be higher. I've seen ranges that go 10%. It's just that the distribution boards won't buy it if it's that big of a range. They want something a lot tighter.
Yeah. Well, thank goodness. So anyway, so I could go on, but I'm tired. So I have some solutions. I'd like to go Yeah, I'd like to go through my my solutions.
So I just want to pause one there for a moment. For everybody who
Okay.
is here, I see that Kate, you shared a question in the chat. We have a dedicated questions section. Once Tamara finishes going through the solutions, we're going to shift into that phase. And in the questions tab, you guys can upvote other questions that you want to hear the answer to. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to sort them by popularity. Whichever question has the most upvotes, we're going to start there. We're going to go down through the list in the amount of time that we have. So go ask questions if there's anything that you want to learn more about from what she's shared so far, or from the solutions that we're going to get into right now. Upvote the ones that you are into, and that'll be how we do our Q&A in 15, 30 minutes, however long it takes us, since you guys have given us permission to go longer. Go ahead, Tamara. Stage is yours.
Okay. My solutions, the primary one is that Health Canada needs to step up to the plate and give its best efforts to this industry instead of impeding it at every turn. We have the chance, we can still be a global player in the cannabis market. What's holding us back are inefficiencies, impediments that can only be construed to be purpose-built. These weird interpretations of from one thing, from one side of the country to the other, wildly inconsistent interpretations, wildly inconsistent applications of the standards that are not even written down. That we're having to guess at what they are. I'm speaking to the federal government here. It's time for you to step in, because Health Canada has been impeding this industry at every turn, and that's wrong. And it's counter to Canada becoming the power that it can be. I also would ask that you remove the provinces from the equation. They've had their chance, and mostly they've just royally botched things up. Saskatchewan being the single exception, and BC getting credit for effort given. The provinces, we need to have consistency. We need to make the fees and duties and extra charges and syntax and rules the same across the country, whether it's openly admitted or not. This makes Canada look like a wannabe instead of a global player.
And so,
right?
so I want to just touch on that, like, because
Okay.
if it's done federally, I mean, to me, like, with the way things are done right now, it seems obvious that it would be just handed to Health Canada, and I feel like that's almost worse than, like, because I like, the provinces, while they, to me, like, both Health Canada and the provinces, and to a certain degree the CRA as well, they've all fucked up. They've all made huge mistakes, made huge assumptions. The CRA I really like, because they have openly said many times publicly, this is new for us. We don't really get this industry yet. It's going to take us a few years to figure this out. So sorry if there's growing pains. CRA, if you're listening to this, I am so thankful for you guys to just admit that you guys don't know what you're doing, and that's okay. You're gonna try to work with people, and you really have tried to work with people. There's definitely been hiccups here and there. Like, I have some qualms with what you guys have done, but overall, I think that approach is great. Health Canada's in the same exact boat in that they are new to this industry, don't understand it. There's a lot of growing pains, but I feel like there's been like a much stronger sense of ego and attachment to this idea of, like, we know what's right, and this inability to admit that, hey, we actually don't know what we're doing, and it's going to take time to figure it out. And I think, like, if you guys just expressing, hey, we've fucked up and are gonna try to do better, is gonna go a long way to rectifying kind of your brand or your image, so to speak, amongst the craft, and then to legitimately actually try. That's also critical too. You can't just say you're going to try. The provinces, right. I like, at least in, I live in BC, so that's what I am exposed to, because they as well admitted, okay, we've taken missteps and we're trying to do better. I see Ontario with the OCS really trying to make a space for craft cannabis producers, and I see a lot of these provinces really trying to make things better. Maybe not all the provinces, because I'm not aware of what goes on in every single province, but I fear that if it were to be taken away from the provinces, that like energy that's there and quite a few of the provinces to make things more accessible and easier for small scale growers, I fear that would just, the momentum would just be taken away.
Okay, well, so what I'm saying here is that don't take some of my recommendations, take all of my recommendations. And the first recommendation was Health Canada needs to step up and stop impeding. And so if that was the case,
Okay,
if
so
they were doing their
okay,
duty,
I see what you're saying. Okay,
if
that
they
makes sense.
were not impeding, if they were actually trying to help, if, as you said, they get the ego out of the equation and say, okay, we realize there's some issues, but in fact they aren't, and this is my own experience. An incorrect observation on my inspection report, incorrect, absolutely incorrect. It said that some destruction events were not being recorded. That's absolutely incorrect. I had destruction records for every single destruction. There was no way they could have come to that determination, and so they just let it go. They didn't remove that finding. They refused to acknowledge that was an incorrect finding. That finding is still there, but they aren't requiring a solution for it. Okay, that was their way of saying, oh yeah, you're right, that we were mistaken, let's take that off of there. No, it's sitting there for all posterity to see that I was found to have not been recording all of my destructions, which is absurd. I'm the queen of compliance. I do everything right. There's no question that I had documented everything.
And Stacy in the chat, who also has a background in pharmaceutical compliance, says that an audit she just participated in, the same exact thing had happened. Something they were wrong in something, but it got left on the audit despite them being wrong.
Yeah, it isn't getting changed. It isn't getting taken off. All they'll do is not require
a thing to address the thing that was wrong.
That's right. Corrective actions. You aren't required to make corrective actions for the things we've made mistakes with.
I thought I had like a good understanding of the scope of the silly things that Health Canada does, but in this conversation, I've already learned 2 or 3 new things that I didn't already know about. It never seems to end.
Oh, I know, and the new snarl is going to be Farmgate. I mean, the Farmgate process needs to be untangled, solidified, and consistent across the country. This is one of the things that needs to be pulled away from the provinces because, with the exception of BC, everybody else seems to be screwing it up. So, the Farmgate is going to make or break the craft industry. Okay, so that's a pretty big concern. All right. Without Farmgate, then how can you justify wine tastings and breweries? How can they serve their product there? I mean, it needs to be consistent, people. We're not recreating the wheel. We have lots and lots and lots of regulations already in place for these other substances that need to be controlled, and that's working just fine. Let's skip through the garbage and get to the point where cannabis is just like a winery, or a brewery. All right.
So on that note, to play devil's advocate, the way that the Farmgate wine tastings take place, my understanding is that's controlled provincially. That's not a federal thing. So, I could see
that the allowing of it is federal, allowing it to happen and saying, I think, and actually, I don't know. So somebody could stand corrected on this.
I'm pretty sure it's provincially dictated. Is there anybody in the audience who knows with certainty? Because both Tamara and I think does anybody know that they can share like with certainty that wine tastings at a farm is provincially regulated versus federally? My understanding, Tamara, is that it's like allowed federally, as in like they're not going to get in the way, but it's up to each province to determine the rules and regulations and policies around that.
And if you look, we have very, very similar.
So Sophie Mass says that public consumption is regulated provincially, so it is done on a provincial level.
Okay. All right. And we have fairly consistent across the provinces. So what I'm calling for is consistency, and that is the federal government's mandate to ensure that there's consistency some degree of
Yeah.
consistency across the province. I mean,
Yeah, and I think especially, like Lacey brings up a great point that in Quebec, it's a super cannabis unfriendly
yes,
environment there, political environment there. And so if there wasn't that kind of consistency, that would be really sad for Quebecois growers where, every other province is having farm gate, and then, they're left to have a much more difficult business model that they have to realize if they want to be able to make ends meet for them.
Yeah, Quebec comes in dead last as far as the poor quality of rollout, and the impedance to the industry in their province. And this is all tax money that comes in, folks. I mean, this is just good business to have. To facilitate those wheels turning, and yet these decisions are being made for archaic stigmas that have long since been tossed out the window by and this is truly impeding Quebec's chances to become a real power, as I believe that they could, comparable to BC potentially, but anyway,
so what's
let me
another solution that you have in mind?
Okay. Yeah. So, again, obviously, there need to be separate microbial levels for recreational. Healthy people don't need pharmaceutical grade cannabis. Duh. So, and then this ship has sailed, but implement some kind of market controls to prevent ever mounting gluts upon gluts from building. Let's play the tape forward. Where are we going to be in a year, 2 years? 3 billion grams in storage? 4 billion grams in storage? Facing an economic catastrophe in the industry like Oregon suffered? They say experience is a fool's only teacher. Let's learn something before it's too late. Here is, this is like, at this level, it's like, Mr. Prime Minister, are you aware of what's happening over here? This is a disaster. Worse, it's a national embarrassment. The emperor is butt naked and somebody needs to do something. And with that, I'm done and open for questions. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thank you, Tamara. That was great. All right, let's go take a look and see what questions have been upvoted. And for those of you who might have missed it earlier, the way we're doing this Q&A is you share your questions in the questions tab, not the chat tab. You can upvote other questions that you like that you want to hear an answer to, and I'm just going to sort them by popular, and we'll go through them in order. So order by upvotes. Only one thing has been upvoted so far. That's Kate Windermere's questions. Wait, Windermere. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but doesn't matter, because you want to know, you're curious if experience as a quality assurance person in the wine industry would count as food. Do you have any idea about that, Tamara?
I would say yes. I would say yes. Yeah. But then I work on a logical basis, and I'm not entirely sure Health Canada is in this respect. So I would say
the answer
yes,
is maybe, Kate. The answer is
I'm
maybe. We don't
know. Maybe. Good luck with that. Yeah.
All right. Nothing else has been upvoted so far, so I'm just going to go in order of what I see here. Next up is a question by Curtis Campbell. Have you found any luck with financing a micro cultivation / processor? I am located in Saskatchewan. Thanks for having this discussion.
I have not even heard of financing with micro cultivation or processor. Your best bet, by the way, is processor, because we do have such a glut on the market, over 1 billion grams. Prices are really, really bad. They're down to $1 or $2 a gram for producers, for cultivators. So unless you're producing quads that are over 20%. So it can't just be quads. It can't be just over 20%. Quads that are over 20% are getting a decent price. Okay. So other people are struggling to sell their product for a decent price. So if you have the choice, go for a microprocessor. Even with the QA, I've written a white paper to Health Canada recently suggesting, recommending that if we don't have a QAP that meets all of their, first of all, reduce their rigid criteria, and then second of all, if we have somebody that maybe has taken a course or two in cannabis QA, and has some experience, then perhaps we can approach this by assigning them a QAP trainee position where they do all of the minor stuff in-house, and you get an outside consultant to come in for the heavy duty releases like product release, recalls, complaints, inspections, anything like that. And that is a part-time job. It doesn't need to be a full-time job to have somebody at that caliber on site. So, what the solution that I'm proposing is call your QAP trainee and let them train under the consultant QAP for a year. And then as a method of identifying if they're up to snuff or not, after the microprocessor has gone through a full Health Canada inspection and they came out successfully from that, then your QAP and training can be graduated or to a full QAP. Okay, so it's an interim step. I've offered multiple interim steps in a white paper to Health Canada because this is not working.
And Curtis, to answer other aspects of your question there definitely are some investors out there that want to invest in cannabis, but with the way that the overall market, which includes all the big enterprises that have cared about nothing but stock market value, have created shitty products, have created that glut that Tamara was referring to earlier, and have there's been like a lot of failures within the industry. Most investors are pretty scared of the cannabis industry because they've just seen failure and they don't understand that the craft cannabis industry is quite different from the enterprise side, and that craft producers do actually create value. And even if they do, with all of the challenges that exist right now that we've talked about, it's still a big scary thing for some investors. And even if it wasn't, like, the fact of the matter is, if they were to, you can't apply for a license until you've built a facility, which means that you could theoretically build a facility and get rejected, and then that investors like put all this money into you building out that facility, and it doesn't amount to anything. And so that's a huge risk for a lot of investors. So those are some, and then also most banks are completely unwilling to provide any kind of loan to the cannabis industry. So those are all barriers that exist that make getting financed for this kind of thing really difficult. Like, if money is an issue, like, one thing that is possible to consider, which is totally the opposite of what Tamara was talking about there, is doing an outdoor micro facility that's got bare bones everything. Like, you could theoretically have a micro where you don't even do your own drying. It's like, as soon as you harvest your plants, you just send it immediately to another producer. That can be a really affordable, sub $50,000 operation with the right kind of set of things to get you off the ground. It comes with its own challenges. Like, one huge challenge is, can you ensure that you always have a buyer immediately ready to pick up your cannabis? Because you cannot then store it on your facility if you don't have the building to store it, and so on and so forth. And that's a huge way to save that cost by not needing to have a building. So there's creative possibilities, but every choice has major pros and major cons.
Sami, I'd like to interject something as well.
Yeah.
All it takes to have a microprocessor facility, other than the QAP, is to have a standalone building that meets GPP requirements. So if you have a standalone single car garage like I did, you could upgrade that for $10,000, $15,000 into a GPP compliant facility and get a license if you can find a QAP. Again, that's the big blockade to the microprocessing. And the advantage of doing microprocessing is that you have a lot of microcultivators out there who want to package their own product under their own name. They want their own brand getting out there. There's only one that I know of that's able to do that under their own name, or that will be able to do it. I don't know of anybody that's actually under their own brand. So, there's a huge demand for that. There's a huge demand for edibles. The only thing we have in the edibles market are gummies, mints, and chocolates. Ooh, there's an awful lot of, so there's someone out there with one cookie, okay? There's a lot of opportunity in the edibles market. So if
and
you have
things
a
that are savory
garage,
that aren't desserts, like I'm sure
savory, something that's not sweet, for God's sakes. What about diabetics? What about people who are on diet, the keto diet? I mean, anything. So there's just a huge amount of opportunity in the edibles if you can get past the roadblock of the QAP requirements. If they were reasonable requirements, if you had to have, if you were going to make something like a beef jerky, infused beef jerky, then okay, then you need to have, food QAP experience or training or a consultant. Okay. But if you just want to bag flour for a micro, that should require almost no skill sets, okay? Especially if you have airtight SOPs that you follow and you can't make mistakes because the SOPs, if you follow the SOPs, they'll keep you in line. So there's multiple ways
Tamara,
to go about.
I'm going to interrupt you there because you told me that I can. We've talked about this a bunch before, and we have a lot of questions. So I want to move on to the next thing. Okay. And I appreciate you telling me before we started that I could do this, so I don't feel bad about doing it. Okay, Nicholas asks, how many people with those extremely stringent QAP qualifications even exist in Canada? Do you have any sense of that, Tamara?
Can you hear me? I'm getting that there's a problem with my connection, and it's trying
for a
to
moment.
reconnect.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly right now.
All right, good.
There was a moment where it was hard to.
Okay, but I did. So, how many people with those extremely stringent QAP qualifications even exist in Canada? They've all been hired by the standards. The standards can afford a 6-figure salary, and they've all been hired by the standards, and or Health Canada, who also put out a notice I believe it was last summer, and hired a bunch of new inspectors. So the people that are qualified to do this are already employed. And there's this major gap between what a micro actually needs to bag their flour and what Health Canada says they need to bag their flour. So,
we're getting back to the same conversation, so I'm going to cut it off right there. So basically, nobody's available in Canada. All right. Could you please speak to the possibility of working with a remote QAP for micros? Asks Kate.
I love that idea. Health Canada themselves have proven that they have not lost any of their ability to inspect by doing inspections remotely. My inspection last August was remote. The entire thing. COVID was in full display, and so we did everything over the phone and over Zoom, and it was fine. They had no problem finding with making observations. I think it's absolute proof that the QAP does not need to be resident or even local, that you can be. My inspectors were, I think they were in Halifax, so we're talking 4, 5, 6 hour drive away. Okay, so they were not remotely close, yet it didn't impede their inspection whatsoever. So I think that sets the precedent, the inarguable precedent, that remote QAPs are a thing and need to be acknowledged as a thing and allowed.
But right now it's not allowed. Is that correct?
Right now, I was turned down as a remote QAP for Fredericton, which is an hour and a half away. So that was a year ago, or not quite a year ago. So I mean, that's so remote QAPs are being discussed, I think, but they haven't been approved, and Health Canada just needs to approve them.
So
they're doing it remotely.
You've had 2 questions, and both of them are strong, resounding maybe.
Welcome to regulated industry, especially a new regulated industry. Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
here we have Dwayne Jones asks, when other countries export import into Canada, do they have to meet the same quality requirements that we in Canada have to meet? I will answer that a little bit first and then let Tamara run with it, because she used to be a GMP validator, so she really understands this world. It really depends on the country you're going to, because each country is going to have different requirements. I think the standard that if you want to be exporting internationally, the standard you should be adhering to is EU GMP, which is stricter than GPP compliance here in Canada. GPP is kind of like a subset of EU GMP. There's also a standard for the actual cultivation side called GACP. So those are good agricultural and cultivation practices. Just to make sure you don't know, if in case you don't know the acronyms, GMP is good manufacturing practices, and there's just like a lot more you have to do, a lot more requirements for the building itself, a lot more that you have to record in order to be able to export, say, into any European country. Tamara, it's saying that your bandwidth is too low right now, so I will move on to the next question and hope that you are returned before. Actually, do you have audio right now, Tamara? Can you try saying something?
Yes.
Oh, we can hear you.
Hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Okay,
Oh,
so it's just the video that it's
good.
been disabled. Okay, so is there anything else you would add about international standards beyond what I've said there?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well, Sammy. It's the one to aim for is EU GMP, and that's required for all of Europe, all the European Union, and that requires adhering to more stringent standards than what GPP is. So you almost have to start as a GMP, as a GMP facility. You need to at least to have operated for a year as a GMP facility, okay, before you can have EU GMP inspectors in and get certified as. But people are doing it, and my SOPs are GMP compliant. So I mean, it is possible. I wanted to say something about exporting. Exporting is going to be very easy from our side. It's going to be easy to export, but it's virtually impossible to import anything into Canada, especially if there's already a glut on the market. They're not going to let any cannabis in. I can't see them letting any cannabis in. That just is counterintuitive, So I don't think importing, unless it's something that we just can't have here, don't have here, and then importing is a nightmare with Canada. Okay, I have imported a number of different things over the years, and it is a nightmare. So exporting, though, on the other hand, is quite easy. So I think that if you're going to choose one or the other, definitely export. And I think there's a big market that potential in the U.S. The U.S. is opening up as a big medical cannabis market. With cannabis as cheap as it is in Canada, and with all of the regulations in place, we're a minor step away from FDA, from medical grade marijuana in the U.S. Okay, so the U.S. may decide we're just going to do recreational. We'll buy all of our medical marijuana from Canada because it's so cheap. It doesn't make sense for us to build a medical cannabis facility down here when we can buy it for $1 or $2 from Canada. So, and this is good quality product. This is not bad stuff. This is solid AAA plus product that's going for $1 a gram. So I think that there's a big opportunity that we should look at as exporting medical grade cannabis for those of us who want to stay medical grade, exporting our medical grade cannabis into the U.S. And because they have no impetus to create a facility for medical grade. You could buy it, really good stuff that's proven up here and tested up here for $1 a gram. So it's a big opportunity right there.
Okay, Sylvia Chong asks, how do you feel about certifying our QAPs? If standards are established,
I love that idea.
Let's finish.
Yeah.
Let's finish what she has to share. If standards are, but I'm glad you love the idea. If standards are established by the industry, they could inform Health Canada's QAP qualification process. All right,
Yeah,
so
I think that's definitely what we need to do with QAPs. This still leaves room for a level below a QAP that somebody could be the QAP in training, which I believe strongly in, because I believe that's the only way that microprocessors are ever going to be able to get their QAPs trained adequately with the dearth of qualified QAPs that are available. If we don't allow remote QAPs to do hands-on training with the QAP trainees, there's just, this bottleneck is going to continue, and uh, and that's unacceptable. Okay, it's just unacceptable. So I love the idea of certifying our QAPs. I think we could establish standards by the industry that would absolutely, I think Health Canada would be open to it, because some of the stuff that they're asking for is so ludicrous that it's like they opened a bag of GMP words and pulled out a bunch of GMP words like efficacy studies and validation of test methods and all these things that they want us to adhere to, and none of them even apply. So I think Health Canada should be very interested in the industry developing standards, and I would be
yeah,
interested
and
in
Stacey
working on that.
Johnston's adds to
Yeah.
that there should be a different level for QAPs that are doing dry flower packing only, with less requirements that allows micros
Yes,
that would allow micros to enter the market, which 100% matches everything you've been sharing there.
absolutely.
Okay, we got one
Yeah,
last question
absolutely.
from Dave Christie, who asks, can you expand on what standalone means? And I'm assuming he's talking about the standalone building from the past. And he specifically asks as well, can an individual unit in a strata complex with secure, isolated access qualify as standalone?
Absolutely. So if you have a unit in a strip mall, absolutely the unit. If you have a unit which is a part of a building in a big industrial complex, absolutely that'll pass. Those have passed. Standalone means it can't be attached to your house in any way. That's what I meant. So if you have a garage that's attached to your house, at least at this point, that's not acceptable. You need a garage that's standalone.
What if it's
So
attached to somebody else's house, but it's not
no,
your house?
can't be attached to a residence.
Okay.
Can't be attached to a residence. Yeah.
Yeah. So either in an industrial or business zone, or it's its own building that isn't attached to anything
Yes.
at all, period.
Yeah, and there's a lot of buildings that are standing empty in small towns, folks.
Yeah.
I mean, we've just lost our A&W. That's a commercial kitchen. That wouldn't take a whole lot to get that commercial kitchen up to GPP standards, so that you could create edibles in it.
Yeah.
It's a commercial kitchen, so that's all you really need for edibles.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of opportunity if people stop looking at the only way into the industry is to build a purpose-built building. There's lots of diners and bakeries that have gone under. So,
Lots of
look at
creative
these
solutions available for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, Tamara, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence and your opinions and your thoughts. It's been super eye-opening and super wonderful to get to have you share all that with us here today. People who are here in the audience, if you have any last comments you want to share with Tamara or myself, please do so now. We're gonna end this event in a couple minutes here. Just so you guys know, in 2 weeks, we have our third episode. And for that episode, we're going to have none other than Stacey Johnston and Shannon Ross from the Cannabis Business Transition Initiative team at Community Futures in Central Kootenays here in Nelson. And that'll be a super neat perspective. I'll give you a little snippet of future guests so you guys know who's coming up after that. We've got John Conroy and Jack Lloyd, lawyers who've taken Health Canada to the Supreme Court in the past and won. They're going to be episode number 4. We've got the BC Craft Farmers Co-op with Sophie Mass and David Herford for episode number 5. We have Brittany Anderson, MLA here in BC, for the Nelson Creston riding for episode 6, and a whole bunch of more really awesome people with very, very different perspectives on the industry. So we hope you guys keep coming back to the State of Craft every 2 weeks, Friday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. And thank you all for being here. Tamara, do you have any last words that you want to share with our audience here?
Well, I've dumped a lot of negative information on the group, and I just wanted to say that it's still worth it. This industry is still worth it to get into. Just do it smart. Go in knowing what you're up against, and take your time and don't quit your day job until you start getting revenue in. Yeah, but if we just lay down and stop fighting, then the powers that be who want to keep small growers out will have won. And so I think it's imperative that we continue to fight. We go in with eyes open, but we continue to fight.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm going to end this event right now, and within a few minutes, it'll be available to rewatch as a replay. If any of you guys know somebody that you think should really watch this, you can send the same registration link that you used to register for this event, and then they can register for it and watch it afterwards. We will be putting both this episode and the first episode with Kylie Baudry and Che LeBlanc. We'll be putting both of those up on YouTube probably in the next week or two. We're going to start after a week or two of every episode. It'll go live on YouTube as well. Yeah, we hope you guys are enjoying all the content that we're putting out. We at CertiCraft have really focused on bringing a lot of great content for craft producers now. And if you go to content.certicraft.com, you'll find all kinds of webinars and videos and blog posts with little tips to help licensed producers. I hope you all have a great day. And Tamara, thank you again. And ta-ta!